Musketeers, Woody Huffines here. One of the things that we used to do every now and then in the Artisans of the Light cohort was a thing called a skills challenge, where one of us would come up with a skill that we had developed and throw it out there in a place for people to go look at that. And the challenge was go try to make it your own. One of the things that we had talked about recently in the Artisans of Light cohort was how to blend in effects that you use, like topaz glow or topaz impressions, into an image so that those effects were not overwhelming. And the other thing that we've talked about is some of the things that I'm learning in the Sphere 2 cohort the cohort of Landscape Mastery with Ron Clifford. So I thought I'd combine all of that stuff in with a little bit of HDR and throw this out there for y'all to look at while I go away on the weekend and lay by a swimming pool and hopefully take some pictures. So let's get started. What we're going to work with today are 3 images. This is a 3 exposure bracket. It's 2 stops underexposed, the metered exposure, and 2 stops overexposed, a standard HDR bracket. We're going to do some treatments to those. We're going to combine some treatments. We're going to though export it into Photomatix to do those treatments, import it back into Lightroom and do some work in Photoshop, and finally back to Lightroom. And just explain the idea and the skill and the challenge that I am throwing out for you to go try. First, a little bit about my workflow. I've got a folder on my desktop called the working folder. That's a way for me to collect the things that I'm going to be working in one place, and I'll show you why as we go through this. The first step would be to select the 3 images, export. Missed it, export into Photomatix Pro. You get this dialog box where you align the images. I'll crop the result. The images are shot on a tripod. I'll reduce the chromatic aberrations, but importantly, I will not automatically re-import into Lightroom. There's a reason for that, and I'll show you later. But for the way that I do this workflow, that's a very important point. I'm going to cancel that because I've already done the export so that you didn't have to sit and watch the export. Here's the export. If you're not familiar with Photomatix, Photomatix is an HDR program. You've got the sliders to make changes to the image on this side, preset styles on this side, and as you select a preset style, it gives you a preview of what that style is. And there are a lot of styles in the Photomatix software that I like some of. For example, if I look at a painterly style, see the painterly style, I might like the way it looks over here and I might like the water, but I don't like that the trees are too crunchy. And in a photographic style, I might like the way that the trees are really bright and not like the way that's dark. Or if I go down and look at a stronger painterly style, ooh, that's just nuclear. I might like a little bit about how the water looks down here. I don't like the waterfall, and I don't like the trees. Now, obviously, you could go into Lightroom and make individual adjustments to areas of a base image and affect all of these changes in a good base image with a wide dynamic range, but I don't want to do that because I'm too lazy and I like this better because I get a cornucopia of ideas just by poking through this. So let's go look. Photographic. I kind of like the trees. Not so much the foreground, but I like the way the trees look in this image. So I will apply that preset. I will save a final image. It will go out to my working folder that we talked about earlier. I'll save it. And now I've got that saved. And let's redo this image with other settings. For example, the painterly sometimes provides something that's exciting. Now let's look around. See, now on this painterly, in this version of painterly, I like that tree. I like the colors and tones of that tree, but I don't know that I like much else about it, but we'll see. Again, apply that image or apply that preset. Save a final image. It goes out to the working folder. Now we got treatment number 2. Let's redo with other settings. See if there's anything else that I really like about some of these others. I kind of like that. That's kind of crunchy in the foreground. I kind of like that in the water. It's a little bright in the water. That's nuclear stuff there, not so much. It's a vibrant. It's a little crunchy. Let's go back to this Painterly 4 because I kind of like the water here and I kind of like the waterfall in this one. So we'll apply that. Save the final image. Final image goes back out to that working folder. And redo with other settings one more time, and I'll show you this. I'll cancel out of the presets by clicking that and just closing it. And then this image I will save as a final image. And I'll save it to the same place. And this fourth one's important. This is a trick that Scott Norris taught me that I think Andy Wheeler taught him, which is creating a 32-bit HDR image. So let's go back to Lightroom. There's that working folder. It shows 0 folders because it hasn't been synchronized. So I synchronize the folder. It finds the 4 pictures that I put. Now I've got a working space where I've got the 4 pictures with the 4 different treatments. Before we get started on the Photoshop piece, let's talk a little bit about a 32-bit HDR. In the Develop module with the 32-bit HDR, where you normally have plus or minus 5 exposure values on the exposure slider for 10 total stops of exposure range. In a 32-bit HDR image, you've got minus 10 to plus 10. So even at plus 10, you can still see some of it's not completely blown out, it's completely white. There's still some things that to be seen in the image. So if you take that image, you've got a tremendous dynamic range to use as a base image to apply that other stuff that we've done from looking at the others. Before we do that, let me set the black point right there so I'm not clipping any blacks. Just a little bit of black clip right there. I'll set the white point so we're not clipping any whites. Maybe bring up the shadows just a touch to brighten that foreground and the left. And there's a really good base image. Now again, if you wanted to crunch up the trees and glow up this and change that, you could do it in Lightroom or in Photoshop from this image. But there's some examples and bits and pieces of these images that I like. So let's just blend them together. We'll go back to the Library module. We'll select the thumbnail view. Select those 4 images, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. And by opening in layers in Photoshop, it will open each of those images as a separate layer in Photoshop so that we can blend and touch and put those things together in some combination that's artistically pleasing. So there are the 4 images. What I will usually do, just in the name of completeness, is use the auto align layers and the auto setting to align the layers to make sure they're all lined up so that you don't get any artifacts when you start blending and moving things through the images. So there we go. We've got the four images. I will generally take that 32-bit HDR, stay right there, move it to the top of the stack. So I'll be blending those things onto this image. So we can go down through, and I'll usually start with the smallest space that I like, and in this case it's the next layer, which is, I like the way that this tree looks and some of the things on this tree. Not so much all the dead leaves, but the tree trunk itself. So how do we blend that in? We apply a layer mask to that image, select black as our paintbrush color, foreground color, excuse me, and select the paintbrush. And the next thing I'll do is I'll lower my flow down to 10–12%, way down, so that I'm not painting very much of that effect on at one time, which will allow you to be a little more circumspect in putting that stuff in the image. If you see, if I hold Alt and click the thing, you can see I'm adding a lot of that lower layer there because it's a pretty dark black, and then a little gray up here. So by doing it a little bit at a time, it keeps you from overcooking an image with too much of the effect that you want to paint through. That's the discussion that we've been having about using topaz impressions, for example. How do you take a topaz impression or a texture or something else and put it in the image where you can paint it in and control it in by using a low flow on the layer mask to blend it in gently. I like the way that looks. I like that spot up there, and I like the warmer colors along that trunk. So I'm happy with that. Hit Control-E, Command-E. Got to select that. Control-E or Command-E, and blend those layers down. So now this is the base image. So what's the next thing we want to add in? Here, I think I want to add in this crunchy, more contrasty, deeper color, more saturated water in the foreground. So same drill. Get us a layer mask, paint in black with a low flow, and gently put in that effect. Might take it down a little bit right there. I'll switch foreground color to white to take some of that back out on a couple of those places that it's just a little nuclear. Let's take it all out. I want to start again here. Got a little carried away. All right, here we go. Let's try it again. Black is the foreground color. Let's get a bigger brush. There we go. Just brush that in lightly. So it gives us more foreground interest without doing the full boat, really harsh HDR part of that. So I like that piece. Now let's look and see the water. See, the water there is a little crunchy. It's a little contrasty, I think. Let's look at the bottom one. I think the water in the pond above the dam is a little better in the bottom image than it is this one. So we'll leave that in as blended in. Again, select that layer, Control or Command E, blend it down. Now that's the base image. Same drill, layer mask, paint in black on the foreground. And in this case, I like that water so much. Instead of trying to fade it in a little bit at a time, I think what I'm going to do is run my flow back up to 100% and just paint it in. Instead of trying to layer it on a little bit at a time, I'm going to go full boat and just use that as the water. I like it. Same drill again. Control or Command D, blend it down. Now that's the base image. Now we've got some cleaning up to do. In terms of one of the things that I've been learning in Ron Clifford's cohort, Landscape Mastery, is that the little things make a difference. So let's hit Control J, Command J, get a new layer, get our spot healing tool, and go after some of the little stuff that'll make a difference. One of the little things that will make a difference is getting rid of this enormous sensor spot, and a little small one there. See, is there anything else in the water that we need to do something with? And maybe that leaf right there. I'm not crazy about that. Right along the top of the dam, we've got some stuff like that. And clear out that little piece. Not bad. Having trouble with my tablet today. That little branch, I don't like the way that breaks that white line there. Oops. Do that. There's some dark spots in the water that I'm not crazy about. We'll pull those. Put that in. There we go, like that. Maybe that one. Don't like that horizontal branch there. Ooh, hate the shepherd script branch. Gotta get rid of that. Maybe that. That one, don't like that. Clean that little spot up there. All right. Get rid of that. Maybe get rid of all of that. That one doesn't bother me so much because it's a continuation. I'll leave that there. We'll pull that. Let's scroll over. Oh, big vertical. No, don't want the big vertical. Draw the eye. Yep, get rid of that. Orange leaf. No. Or trash bag. God knows which it is. Is there anything else that we just can't put up with? I think that's about it. Well, some of these leaves are a little bright. I kind of leaked over on those when I was brushing in that tree. I don't think I want those really bright spots there. All right, we got some warmth in the tree. Let's fit screen. Now, as I toggle those adjustments on and off, you can see all the places that there were just little distractions. Like the branches in the water that break up the water, or the stuff right on the edge of the waterfall. Minor things, but it's those little things. Pay attention right there, that vertical right there. That vertical, as your Y moves across the water, just stops at that vertical. You take out that little vertical and it makes a big difference. I like that. Command or Control E, blend it down. This is the final image out of Photoshop. We'll take this back into Lightroom and make some final adjustments. Save it, close it. It'll re-import into Lightroom, and it's named Painterly 2, unfortunately, because that's just the way the last image was. But this is the image now that we can work on a little bit in Lightroom to add some depth to the image. In a landscape image, the things that are sharpest or brightest appear closest to the eye. The things that are darkest and have the least amount of contrast or sharpness appear further away from the eye. So as you can see, this picture as it is constituted now is kind of flat. Because of all the brightness in the trees up here, they appear much closer than you want them to, than I want them to appear in the final image. So let's do a couple of adjustments here to add some depth to the image, and then we'll be done. Let's get an adjustment brush. I'll bump the exposure up maybe a third of a stop. There we go, third of a stop. I could just type it in. Let's type it in. That will be easier. Oh, there we go, 0.33. That's third of a stop. There we go. Let's just kind of cruise along through there. A little brightness there. I picked up some artifacts somewhere along the line I didn't notice. That's not a good thing. I'm going to leave them because I don't want to go back. Add a little bit of brightness to that water. I'm going to go ahead and crank the flow up a little bit. Do the full image, do the full boat. I had the flow down. Take that water that's in the front here and add a little bit to it. Let's slide the exposure up a little bit more. There we go. It's almost a full stop. That brings that water forward. Excuse me, it brings it forward because it's now a little bit brighter. We can look at, and I'll quickly look at clarity and see if I want to bring the clarity up to bring it forward even more. Let's see what that looks like. Bring the clarity up. Yeah, that sharpens it up a little bit. Gives us a little more foreground interest, a little brightness, a little clarity in the foreground, which brings that forward in the image. So the next thing we need to work on is get some of the brightness out of these leaves. Now, if I look at the leaves, one of the things that I notice is that the predominant color in that brightness is yellow. So instead of trying to paint it in, let's make a global adjustment by going down to the luminance slider, taking our yellow slider, and just taking it down a little bit. Take some of the luminance, the yellow luminance, out of those trees. A little bit of the green out, which will darken it a little bit. I'm having trouble with my tablet today. It's wearing me out. There we go. And maybe a little more saturation in the trees since we dropped the luminance down. There we go. Now let's look at before and after. Hit the backslash key. There's our before, and there's the after. Notice how your eyes perceive the brighter, sharper water to be a little bit closer, and the trees to be a little bit further away, just by changing the luminance values. Okay, so we've got some of those luminance values touched globally by doing the yellow and the green. Let's do another adjustment brush here. And let's zero the effect by double clicking on effect and drop the exposure in this adjustment brush by, I don't know, 2/3 of the stop, maybe even a stop and a half so we can see what we're doing. Let me get rid of the auto mask. That's causing a problem. There we go. We'll darken that down. Take that down a little bit. Take that down a little bit. Maybe in through here. Drop those back. And then in here, which is the furthest thing away from the viewer's perspective, are that hollow back way up the creek. Now that's a little extreme. We'll drop that to maybe half, 2/3 of the stop. See how that looks. Now pay attention to this area here and look at how it looks to your eye in terms of how far away it is. So we created a little bit of depth, leaving this bright in kind of the middle ground and taking that dark into the background. And I may drop that back here just a little bit more. Just a kind of a dark spot that's off in the distance. And the last thing we'll try is use a graduated filter. Pull a graduated filter down from the top. And let's end the effect right around there. I took some exposure out. Not sure I like that. Maybe I do. Let's take the exposure down just a touch. Maybe a half stop, 1/3 of the stop. It's pretty gentle. Oh, let's see. I'm having trouble with this tablet. I need to change my nib, I think. There we go. And then let's decrease the contrast. And the highlights. And just a touch down on the clarity. See how that looks before and after. See, before, that brightness draws your eye to the top of frame and makes those things look closer. After, when we've made those adjustments to the foreground, the middle ground, and the background, it adds depth to the picture and makes it look more three-dimensional. There, done and done. Maybe not exactly what we need in a couple of places on the image, but overall, I think it made a better image, and we're able to do a whole lot of stuff relatively quickly. If I tried to do that in Lightroom, especially the way my tablet's acting up, it would have taken a month of Sundays. So there's your skills challenge. Try some HDR, try some Topaz Glow, try some Topaz Impression. Get a couple of different takes on a couple of different regions of the picture and blend them in Photoshop and see if it turns out that you enjoy it as much as I. Thanks, and go do the challenge.